My name's Heather O'Connor from O'Connor Family Law, and today joining us is Scott Sereboff. Now, Scott joins us from Deepening Source and has over 25 years experience in security systems and video surveillance. He's also an industry leader in artificial intelligence, which is taking over the world, as well as privacy issues. On a personal note, because we love that, he is the father of 2 boys and a published musician, which is great because I sound like a dying cat when I try to sing. So I appreciate anyone who actually has some sort of musical talent. I don't have it. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I've found that anyone who gets into any type of specialty field has some sort of story behind them of what brought them there. Can you just share a little bit about what brought you into the world of surveillance and security?
Yes. Full disclosure, I'm old. And so this might be before everyone's time, but I had been involved in the telecommunications industry for a long time. And long story short is our physical equipment for use of telecommunications. They had old telecom switches from Cisco that were filled, half a room. They were in World Trade II on 9/11. And after that event, I quite logically said, well, what should I do for a living now? Well, if we're going to keep blowing each other up, maybe security is not a bad field to go into. And here I am.
It's something that is so important and has completely blown up because as we advance more online, you come at this point in time, we live in a world where anyone can be online pretending to be absolutely anyone, whether it's safety reasons or huge world issues like 9/11. And speaking specifically in regards to kids, because we do divorce and custody, so that's what our audience is really interested in.
Okay. I've
heard horror stories of children online who've been taken advantage of, harmed due to somebody pretending to be who they are. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice based on your experience with security, especially with the internet? How can parents really protect their kids today?
Pay attention. Look, that's an incredibly complex answer because everyone's going to parent their kids differently, even as simplistic as when you have to come home in the afternoon, right? Like I was a latchkey kid. I had friends who had to be home at 5. You get the idea. So there's layers that you can put in place. This is what I would tell anyone. The first thing is know what they're doing, which means have a way to keep an eye on what they're doing and also have a way to make sure you can turn it off. It's not as complicated as it used to be to do that. Some people say, oh, it sounds like you're snooping on your kids. I would say that's your job, but it's better, I think, to know. Number 2, and I'm sure you tell this to clients all the time, talk to your kids. Explain what can happen. I'll give you an example from our own past. Our 2 boys, the older one posted a photo of his younger brother's face, and we kind of ran him through the ringer explaining what could happen and why not to do it, and he got it and never did it again. Today, I think the kids are savvier, and they recognize predatory behavior in a way that I don't think I would have.
It's incredible nowadays. So I have a 2-year-old grandson, but his ability to navigate an iPhone, where the age that kids are learning how to do things going back to when I started using a phone and trying to figure it out. And even today, I had to ask how to get the video recording up. It's things that to me are not second nature, but for kids coming up are. And I think it's something that's really important as a parent to be aware of, that your kids know more than you. And a lot of times they are going to be more savvy at it than you, both in how they utilize it as well as what they recognize. I agree with you completely. I think open conversation is so important, but unfortunately, it seems to be lacking a lot. And I think it's a huge problem within families, within relationships, probably within society. And I think that brings me to another question. We've gone out for dinner, my family. So I have a mixed family. I've got 3 bio kids. I've got 3 stepkids.
Oh, dear, family feud.
It's like the modern day Brady Bunch.
Yeah, there you go. Modern day, I like that, actually.
But we'll go out for dinner and you look around, everybody has their heads down, phones in their hands. What being online has really done is created the inability to communicate personally. What ways have you seen, and especially when we're talking about getting into artificial intelligence and conversations, and I've played around with apps that will literally almost become like a best friend to you. They learn how you speak, how you talk, what's important to you, and it learns on how to respond to that. How do you see the advancements in technology interfering with us as a society being able to communicate and build actual relationships with people.
I think we have to be careful in recognizing that every generation, they have their own way of doing things, right?
Mhm.
So when I was my oldest son's age, it would have been 1982. What did we do during the day in the summertime? Your friend group was limited probably to neighborhood kids and by extension, school kids. You jumped on your bike, you ran to their house. We built relationships in person.
Mhm.
We simply had no other way to do it. When we went through the pandemic and they were locked in a house for 2 years, they made new friends online. We as adults have gone through online dating. And when it first started, most of us were, how'd you meet your significant other? And we just ran into each other. I mean, you made something up because now it's not. Now it's completely accepted.
Right.
I think we'll look back on this time and realize that for our kids, this is what they grew up doing. And so it's totally natural for them to say, this is my friend Dominic. Have you ever met him? No. Where does he live? New York. Okay. Is that not just the digital version of a pen pal? Now, having said that, it's also important to make sure they remember that there is a real world. We don't have phones out at the dinner table. I don't let them use their phones when I'm driving, not because it bothers me, because I want the conversation. I limit one of my kids' use of virtual reality because in VR world, you can do anything, break any rule, etc. And it's sometimes, when he was younger, especially, it reflected in his behavior. But if you stomp your feet as an adult and tell them, don't, it's wrong. You distance yourself from your own kids. Like, this is what they're used to. I guess as long as they have real life human friends too, and they do things like we used to do outside and running around and playing and whatnot, then it's okay. It's just a balance. My point being, recognize that they have a bit of their own, not only reality, but allowance for their own reality.
Mhm.
And just throw in a bit of the, can you see a real human every now and again?
I think that's really important to remember. I've heard the saying growing up, you become like your parents. And I remember being younger and I'd put on some music and my parents would be like, what are you listening to? This is terrible. And I see myself doing that now at points as well. So I think that's a really good thing to remember, is that just because it's not normal for you doesn't mean it's not normal for them. And adapting to that and figuring out, okay, it is what it is. How do we build safety precautions around that to ensure that this new normal remains safe for them?
Going back to the security angle, and I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of child psychologist. I'm not. I'm a parent. And I think my kids are pretty well adjusted, but time will tell. The thing with the internet and the thing with the way the internet works today with AI and security, when you open your laptop, some people put the little strip over their cameras. And I think have long since established that if you have a Google device or you have an Amazon device, it's listening for keywords so we can throw them up in a shopping cart somewhere. We don't know a lot. They don't know a lot, because the people that are using the internet, et cetera, including AI for nefarious ends, are way ahead of all of us. There's always a new trick. There's always a new thing to do. You got to be practical too, right? There's actually a lot of sense to the whole idea of it. If you think it's bad, if your gut says it's bad, and I'm a big believer in this, then don't do it or stay away from it. Somebody must have told you, if you're walking in an area that you don't know, act like you belong there. Keep your head up.
Because I remember I've had a couple calls like this where parents will call and say, look, I've had this talk with my daughter. They know they shouldn't be sending pictures. They shouldn't be doing this. But for one reason or another, those pictures happen. And oftentimes, there's a whole story behind it. But I think, again, this kind of goes back to our communication. The more you talk about it, the more you set up parameters, that open line of communication and making sure that these issues are being discussed just needs to happen more frequently, because it definitely is a problem. But is there anything else that parents can do other than get on their phones and check regularly? Is there anything else that you're aware of, whether it's an app or a system or anything, to make sure that these conversations are staying safe?
Strangely enough, I wouldn't suggest you go on their phone. Internet 101, right? When you're in your house and you're on your wireless network, there is what's called a gateway. Think of the internet as your house. Everything that happens has to go through that gateway. When your kid goes onto Roblox, that pathway will be established. And so there's a history. It's like an audit trail in paperwork. You just go look, right? But I remind my kids all the time that I can. The number of people who will pick their nose when there's a security camera in the room is close to 100%, because you eventually forget that the camera's there. But I constantly remind my kids, so does my wife, that, hey, if I need to, I can go back and look. book. You might want to think about that. Situational awareness. You have to be aware of what's going on around you at all time. The kids have to be aware of what's going on around them. And if they are, I think you find that they become less likely to get stumped, even when it's digital. Situational awareness doesn't have to be in the physical realm. It can be virtual as well. I said earlier to you that I think the kids are good at self-policing. My son once told me, if anyone joins one of our games and they start acting at all inappropriate, we just block them. So they're aware of that situation. Make them aware that the internet is a place where X, Y, and Z can happen, and be alert. Then if something weird happens, come and tell me. So anyone that's looking for ways to do this, if you just, Google parental controls, Verizon has their own. All the carriers have their own. You have Net Nanny and you have Kaspersky and you've got Ubiquity system itself. Apple is the worst at it. They have decent parental controls, and I have an iPhone, so full disclosure, but because the iPhone is a locked and closed system, Android's much better for parental controls than iPhones are. Nonetheless, you can still get it for Apple. I can't stress, I think, strongly enough, and I'm sure you're going to agree, don't surprise them, just tell them, I did this and I can see that. If you don't like it, too bad. My kids have debit cards and I can see what they spend. I don't want them to feel spied on, but I also want them to know that if they do something stupid, I'm going to see it.
I think that's also a fine line. Even my kids have complained about it. And it shows that you don't trust me and, you're not giving me my independence in order to make my own mistakes. So as a parent, you don't want your kids to make the same mistakes you did. You want them to be safe. But I think there's a fine line between that privacy versus the security and the oversight, where what you're saying is just remind them, check it every once in a while. You don't have to be every single night going through it, but that is going to be really important, as well as, again, the communication and the transparency of this is how it is.
Mm-hmm. Make them a part of the security plan, as it were. I need to keep you safe. What can we do? Rope them into it. Make them help you. I'm not doing this because I don't trust you. I'm doing this because I don't want white panel van guy to snatch you. My oldest son just had his 8th grade formal and I was sick. And so I was worried I couldn't drive him. I said, can I get you an Uber? He said, no, because I'm not comfortable getting into a car with a stranger. With all due respect to everyone, I think that's actually good parenting. And he didn't say ever. He just said, right now, I think I'm too young and it scares me and I don't want to get into the car with a total random stranger. What are you going to do? Say, you're a weenie? No, you say, okay, that's awesome. We'll call the neighbor. Take the mystery out of things, because almost all kids are the same. You tell them you can't do that and I'm not going to tell you why. I know what my result was.
You go figure it out.
Yep, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to see why they don't want me to do that. So take the mystery out of it and make them a part of the plan. Just keep an eye on them.
I told my kids, you want the phone, you want the car. There's certain things that you have to do. If you don't want to do it, get your own, buy your own, be on your own, and don't be under my roof.
While you live in this house.
Yeah, exactly. And now my kids are all older and they keep coming back. So you can't get rid of them. Insurance now oftentimes wants the tracking in your car to basically say whether you get a good rate or not. Do you believe that that is any sort of privacy infringement, or do you believe that is all that they can accomplish?
I am not a conspiracy crazy person in any way, shape, or form. As the character from West Wing once said, the reason I know there's no conspiracy is there's more than 2 people involved. Now, if you have a modern car, you have anywhere from 4 to 7 systems that are in communication with home base all the time. You just don't know it, but they're innocuous. Your brakes, your suspension, all it's doing is a diagnostic. That's why the little light pops up in your car and says your brake fluid is low. Well, the car doesn't tell you. It got that information from sending the information somewhere that got analyzed. So no, I don't think it's an invasion of privacy at all. It's a fair trade. You don't have to have it in your car. You just don't get the discount.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I happen to have a tremendous amount of back knowledge on how the insurance industry works. So I get it. For people that don't, well, why is it fair? They get it and we don't. The reason is because when that population uses it, it lowers basically the cost to the insurance company, right? So no, it's not a violation of privacy. It would only be a violation if they didn't tell you they were doing it.
It's kind of a good leeway to electronic surveillance within relationships. We're not talking about insurance anymore. We're talking about within your home. Now, I know in my home, we have a number of cameras around the house for a number of reasons, including right over the bar to make sure that kids don't get into anything they're not supposed to. However, when a relationship is going well, that is a very different scenario when a relationship is going down the tubes and, you don't have that trust any longer. We oftentimes within cases hear that because there were cameras in the house, because their ex may be a little bit more savvy technologically than they are, that they're being tracked, they're being bugged, they're being followed. If somebody's concerned about something like this, and this happens a lot of times when you see restraining order issues, what, if anything, can somebody do to make sure that they're not being bugged, because I can't tell you how frequently this question comes up.
Goodness gracious. How do you know if you're being tracked? Okay, so first, take down all the cameras in the house. That should be a no-brainer. Take them all down. Second, put camera coverings over every one of the cameras in the house. Number 3, if you're not tech savvy enough to do this on your own, take your phone and your computer to someone at a computer shop, whatever, and have it looked at to see if this would be a virus or malware, a keystroke tracker on your machine. It wouldn't be a program. It's not like it would be a thing you clicked on that said, watch my life. It would be buried in as a virus or malware that was accessing the camera, or keystroking, which again, it's a virus or malware that will take all of your keystrokes. If you have access to the underlying brains, for example, your Google Nest, change your username and password, or maybe just cancel the whole thing and do it after everything's done. There are devices that you can buy on Amazon. So when you have a camera running, even an IP camera like you and I are staring at each other with, they emit electromagnetic radiation. There are devices that you can buy commercially from Amazon. You just walk through your house waving your little antenna around and it will show you hotspots of electromagnetic radiation. They're not expensive, by the way. If you walk into a room where there's a hidden camera, some of these devices, they'll start beep, 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 and you're like, why is it beeping? It's telling you there's noise somewhere in here. And today it will be, if it's IP based, in other words, it's digital, then go in your router and see what's on your network. When you have a router in your home, it is the same thing as you own the neighborhood or you own the shopping mall, and every store in there has an address. And you know, well, number 217 is vacant, except if it's not, then you want to know, well, what's in 217? You walk down there and it's a camera store. And you're like, well, you're not paying rent, get out. Now, again, if you don't think you can do this technically, that's okay. There are plenty of people who do it. Go on Google, find out who can come and help you with all this stuff. AirTags, if you have them and you're going through a divorce, get rid of them, put them in an iron box. They can't be detected. As scary as it is, your car, because car trackers, you can get them as anything from the size of a phone to the size of a matchbox. But that's another one where you would be better off having a professional come and just run an antenna over it to see. Every digital device you have, they all leave trails as long as it's turned on. So you can also take the very simple step of, when you leave your house, turn off your phone. You can't track it if it's not turned on. Not airplane mode. I mean, just shut it off. Take the battery out if you're that concerned about it, and turn it on when you get to wherever you're going.
I'll just also side note here, because again, just as I was saying earlier, when a relationship is intact, it's a little bit different than when it's going down the slide of towards a divorce. But here, oftentimes putting up cameras or tracking cars, if the relationship's working, isn't necessarily seen as a bad thing.
Absolutely.
But once you're going through that breakup phase, if you're on the verge, and I think there's a fine line, because if you believe somebody's cheating on you, you want to have solid proof. So I think that's a lot of times where you see trackers coming in. But I've also seen it as a basis in order to obtain restraining orders. Oftentimes is that the other spouse is tracking them. It's an invasion of privacy.
Oh, really?
So I just want to make sure that whoever's watching this, make sure you're aware of what you're tracking and how that can affect you. Especially in Massachusetts, I have seen the fact that you're invading somebody's privacy, that you're recording them, that you're putting trackers on a car. There could be a legitimate reason for it. It could be, I believe they're cheating. They're telling me they're not. I want to know whether my marriage is working or not. What I usually tell people is this is really a therapy issue, not a tracking issue, because trackers can lead towards restraining orders.
The court doesn't look back and say, well, 5 years ago when you established it, it was for the right reasons. They just default to, yeah, this is screwed up.
Unfortunately, our court system sucks.
Yes,
it all depends on what judge you're in front of. So you could end up in a judge who is more open to the fact that, okay, well, I understand why you did what you did. And then you might end up in front of another judge that says, no, if you're tracking your spouse, that is an invasion of privacy, regardless of any other reason. And that's where the law here just isn't just, because it is so dependent on who you end up in front of. It's definitely something I've seen over and over and over again, where in Massachusetts, here, cheating isn't a big deal in divorce. It's ethically wrong, maybe morally wrong, but it doesn't get you anything within a divorce. And so a lot of times judges just don't care. We have what's called the irretrievable breakdown of marriage. It's basically I just don't want to be married anymore. And the majority of divorces are utilized on those. We don't do a lot of fault grounds any longer, because that will typically require a trial, because nobody's going to say, okay, yeah, I did that. They just want, plain and simple, we just want to get divorced. And that's what it is.
My only advice there would be keeping track of what is installed. Most of us don't get married planning to get divorced down the road. Everyone goes into it thinking it's wine and cheese and roses and honeys and strawberry. Nothing bad could ever happen. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention to things that are happening. Like, oh, we have Life 360 and we have Google cameras and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just because things are great, they'd be great forever and good for you. You should still know if something could become good and healthy to it's ugly and bad overnight.
Similar to when the pandemic hit, I said, this is either going to be great for relationships or it's going to destroy it. And I remember somebody calling our firm saying, I just can't stand the sound of them breathing anymore. And it was like, whoa, okay, that is severe.
That's a therapy issue, boys and girls.
What was normal and healthy at one point, like you just said, overnight can be something completely different. And it only takes one person's viewpoint on it changing.
This is your world much more than mine, but I think it's good advice and I'm sure you've given it. Don't look for problems because you'll find them. The act of asking then of course raises the why don't you trust me side of the argument, which then goes back the other way.
Another situation we've seen come up, and this doesn't happen very frequently, but enough where I can probably think offhand of at least 10 times, where we've dealt with a case like this, where somebody comes in and only through the discovery process do we find out that there's another family, that there's another life that the other side has been living. And our clients deal with, how did I not see this? And I think, again, fine line to how much you look for things and being aware of your surroundings and asking questions, having conversations versus looking for problems versus burying your head in the sand like an ostrich. I think those are three very different scenarios, and there's a healthy balance in there somewhere that people need to be a part of. Same thing with finances. People come in and they think, okay, no, we're good, only to find out they've got mounds and mounds of debt.
Willful blindness is your fault, whether it's a happy marriage or a disintegrating marriage. And this goes for the kids too, right? When your kid comes home with bloodshot eyes and you say, what the hell's going on? And they say, I have allergies. Okay, today you have allergies, but if it happened 87 times during the school year, maybe you should pay closer attention to what's going on. Willful blindness is a thing. And if you don't want to see it, I promise you won't. This is a lawyer thing too, right? All the available facts will either convince you in criminal beyond a reasonable doubt or not that this thing happened. And you make your decision when you have all of the available facts. Anything less than that is a potential, either a mistake or even worse, an erroneous conclusion. You said about AI, I'll bet you didn't know. Everything in AI is a guess.
I did not know that.
Listen to what I'm saying. Everything in AI is a guess. Oh my God, what do you mean? It's a probability matrix, meaning the way ChatGPT works, it is continually looking at writing and it is using words based on its best guess as to what word goes after what word. The online best friend is becoming that way because they're mimicking you. When AI does facial recognition, it is only saying to whoever's viewing it, I'm 96% sure that was Heather. It will never be 100%. It can't be. So it's all just a guess from your AI. It might be a great guess, and its guess is based on much more data than you as a human can parse and analyze at the time, like literally in a microsecond, but it's still just a guess. In your field where I think AI is either positive or negative, it's now getting to the point where I wonder when will be the first time that Heather and her firm run across an example of someone trying to use a faked video to implicate their spouse in something bad to benefit them in a divorce case.
I had a case where they made up text messages. We were able to prove it. And unfortunately, it was my client who was the one making up the text messages. but I got out very quickly after figuring that out. I always say going through a divorce, I think people's true character come out. They're either going to say, okay, let's get out as best as we can, or they're going to start grasping at the straws. And when they grasp at straws, that's where I think things like AI, because this was some text messaging service where you could put in a phone number to make it look like it was coming from a certain person, but then it's your own text message and you send it and it looks like it came from that other person until you start chasing phone records. And there's so many things, and divorce is a very difficult area because it's a he said, she said field of law. Most things that happen in divorce happen behind closed doors. There's two people there and only two people, and those two people have very different perceptions of even the same event a lot of time, how they're acting, how the other person's acting. So then when you're trying to represent somebody through this, it can become incredibly difficult because they're giving their own side of the story. They're often twisting it. But where you said uses a video against a spouse, I think that's completely possible. And unfortunately, it puts us almost in a conspiracy theorist of, is this real or are they making it up? where most of the times you want to believe that people are going to do the right things, but they don't.
So I'm an expert in the security field, right?
Yes.
As a divorce attorney at your firm, what do you see people saying to you? I'm afraid of X. What are people afraid of that would require physical security to be discussed or system security to be discussed?
Oftentimes, anytime you're dealing with anything domestic violence, there's always a heightened fear that it always begins with a breakdown of trust. So when you have that breakdown of trust, you start believing that the other person is capable of all sorts of things. And then you get an instance where maybe there was physical violence, emotional violence, mental violence, that heightens that feeling of distrust. Then you get into security, and this is where we hear commonly, I believe he's stalking me. I believe she has planted things. I believe that they know exactly what I'm doing. They're following my phone. A lot of it comes from a fear of the unknown. They don't understand how something works. And I didn't realize there was something you could buy on Amazon. So I'm going to definitely be looking that up. I remember we had one case where she believed that every single light bulb in her house had some sort of security tracking device in it. I'm sure in some cases it's true, but sometimes when we hear this, we start thinking, okay, maybe you're the little bit of a delusional one. And because it's very hard to prove that some of that stuff isn't taking place, but it's often not. And it's more just a breakdown of trust.
If you have cameras in your house and you're going through divorce and you're the woman and you live there, keep them on. Change usernames and passwords because they can work for you as well as against you. If you don't have cameras, go get a few. Same exact reason. If you're that worried about it, if you want control, that's how you get it. If you think your soon-to-be ex is tracking you, then go do what we're talking about. Get the control of, I know they're not because, or okay, you find out they are and you end it. And you can say, I knew you were that kind of a person. Or you've become that kind of a person. The reason why you would think every light bulb has is because you have no control. You don't understand where they're getting information from, but feeding that paranoia, unfortunately, is going to work against you and for them. Life 360 is a great 911 app. It has all kinds of features that are designed to protect. Actually, that's what Life 360 is for everyone that doesn't know what it is. It's a phone app that shows where you are. It can show where you've been. My son's got it. So I know when he's going from friend's house to friend's house, but it's got a big button you can press for emergencies. If you don't have an alarm system, get one.
There's so many false allegations of abuse that come up in divorce and custody cases. Because if the other person is abusive, you have the upper hand walking into court. If my spouse is abusive to me, I have a better chance of keeping the house. I have a better chance of keeping the kids. Usually along with the kids comes more money. So there is definitely incentive in family court to lie about something. And I've often told my clients, put the security cameras up. If your spouse or your girlfriend or your significant other, whoever it may be, has at any point threatened a restraining order against you, and you know that it's not true, put the cameras up. We've actually been able to defend restraining orders because of the fact they say something happened. We're able to pull the stream from the video and show that the scenario that they said happened did not actually happen. So again, I think having the information, being in control of the information can be very, very important. But I think you're afraid of what you don't know.
Yep. It is universal. Fear of death is fear of the unknown. Just Google hidden camera detection, hidden camera device. There's a bazillion of them. When you travel, they sell little devices that you can sort of jam underneath the door. So if a door opens in the middle of the night, it depresses a little plunger that sets off a huge alarm. Put one in your bedroom. If you think you have hidden cameras, don't you feel better if you get a well-reviewed under $100 device that you can walk around in your own home and say, hey, I've checked. I know where all the cameras are. There's no hidden camera. If you want to feel safe, control your environment to the best you can. And they threaten you. I've got reporting. No, you don't, because I have this. And they go, oh, don't let yourself be powerless in those situations. Why you tell your young daughters, walk confidently, because most predatory behavior is aimed at people that look easy to turn into prey. So don't make yourself an easy target.
And although this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, it does go hand in hand with, as you're dating, as you're moving into relationships, be aware we deal with very high conflict divorces. And a lot of times those things involve somebody who's narcissistic or manipulative. There's certain behaviors that those types of people are looking for in a partner. It's the same thing, being aware, understanding what that is, being aware of who you are, working on yourself. Those are things that can save you so much trouble down the long run. And it all has to do with just being informed, getting yourself some information.
Look at how a person person treats wait staff. If you find yourself in the company of someone who makes it a sport to belittle people that are, quote, beneath them, to me, that's a red flag. Unless you are that person, that's a red flag. Confidence tends to prevent victimhood. And we have ways to be confident emotionally, but we can also have ways to be confident physically. For example, self-defense classes or awareness classes, you would advocate for that.
No, like 100%. Yep.
Right? So look, if you weigh 105 pounds soaking wet, there's a good chance that no matter how well trained you are, somebody that's 3 times your size will be able to overpower you. That's not the point. The point is, don't get in the situation in the first place and make yourself look like you're too much trouble to be worth the effort. This is why standing up to a bully works. When you punch the bully back, you become too much of an effort for them to bully. They go somewhere else. Take the self-defense class. Take a situational awareness classes. You can teach yourself to be situationally aware. And always remember, if it looks out of place, it is out of place. If it's 1,000 degrees in Texas and you're in a shopping mall food court and somebody walks in a long black trench coat, that's probably not normal. And always trust your gut situationally. If it feels wrong, it is. Period. End of discussion. So be confident and be aware. And you're going to find that not being a victim starts with not looking like one. Look, I can tell you how to make yourself electronically secure. I can argue with you, because it actually is very opinion based, on how to help schools be more protective. Anyone who tells you that they can detect a firearm is lying. They're just flat out not telling you the truth. There's no way right now for AI to successfully and consistently identify a weapon versus a black broomstick. If you really stop to think about it, everything that we are talking about is prevention, because no gun detection system in the world will stop someone from marching up to the school or up to the shopping mall. It might take time off of what their plan is, but it won't stop them from getting there. That's a prevention, just like this. And it all comes back to the same thing, because this is all about how to be more secure when you're in a position where you feel that you are at risk because of something an ex-spouse might do, could do, shown an impetus towards doing. You want to prevent that from happening, because if it does, you're screwed. So prevention is all about this. It's the psychology, it's the awareness, it's the situational awareness. It's just the understanding of all of it, because it all starts from who flinched when the tiger attacked first.
Scott, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. I think what you've had to say is going to be very helpful for anybody who listens to this. And I think there's a lot that can be taken from it. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, as you've said, how you present yourself, your gut instinct, and really trusting that.
Be prepared to take control so that you don't fear what could happen. At least I know I've done everything I can to protect myself or keep myself safe. I'm very passionate about it from all these different angles, and I have enjoyed it as well.